For behold, the Lord of hosts, doth take away from Jerusalem and from Judah the support and the staff, the whole support of bread and the whole support of water, the mighty man and the man of war, the judge and the prophet and the prudent and the ancient, the captain.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We're continuing in the book of Isaiah. We're in chapter 3. So let's, I think I would like to read through, I'm going to try and make a habit of reading through the chapter. Just to get an overview of what we're reading about. It's a kind of a long chapter. Let's get the sense of the whole chapter. I think that's still good. It's only going to take a minute to get through all of it. For behold, the Lord of hosts, doth take away from Jerusalem and from Judah the stay and the staff, the whole stay of bread and the whole stay of water, the mighty man and the man of war, the judge and the prophet and the prudent and the ancient, the captain of 50, and the honorable man, and the counselor, and the cunning artificer, and the eloquent orator. And I will give children to be their princes, and babes shall rule over them. And the people shall be oppressed, every one by another, and every one by his neighbor. The child shall behave himself proudly against the ancient, and the base against the honorable. When a man shall take hold of his brother from the house of his father, saying, Thou hast clothing, be thou our ruler, and let this ruin be under thy hand. In that day shall he swear, saying, I will not be a healer, for in my house is neither bread nor clothing. Make me not a ruler of the people. For Jerusalem is ruined, and Judah is fallen, because their tongue and their doings are against the Lord, to provoke the eyes of his glory. The show of their countenance doth witness against them, and they declare their sin as Sodom. They hide it not. Woe unto their soul, for they have rewarded evil unto themselves. Say ye to the righteous, that it shall be well with him, for they shall eat the fruit of their doings. Woe to the wicked, it shall be ill with him, for the reward of his hands shall be given him. As for my people, children are their oppressors, and women rule over them. O my people, they which lead thee cause thee to err, and destroy the way of thy paths. The Lord standeth up to plead, and standeth to judge the people. The Lord will enter into judgment with the ancients of his people, with the princes thereof. For ye have eaten up the vineyard, and the spoil of the poor is in your houses. And shouldn't be there. What mean ye, that ye beat my people to pieces, and grind the faces of the poor, saith the Lord of hosts. Moreover, the Lord saith, because the daughters of Zion are haughty, and walk with stretched forth necks and wanton eyes, walking and mincing as they go, and making a tinkling with their feet, therefore the Lord will smite with a scab the crown of the head of the daughters of Zion, and the Lord will discover their secret parts. In that day the Lord will take away the bravery of their tinkling ornaments about the feet, and their cauls, and their round tires like the moon, the chains and the bracelets and the mufflers, the bonnets and the ornaments of the legs, and the headbands and the tablets and the earrings, the rings and the nose jewels, the changeable suits of apparel, and the amulets, and the mantles and the wimples and the crisping pins, the glasses and the fine linen and the hoods, and the hoods and the veils. And it shall come to pass that instead of sweet smell, there shall be stink, and instead of a girdle, a rent, And instead of a well-set hair, baldness. And instead of a stomacher, a girding of sackcloth. And burning instead of beauty. And thy men shall fall by the sword, and thy mighty in the war. And her gates shall lament and mourn, and she, being desolate, shall sit on the ground. And what's funny is, as I recall, it's one of those instances where I think the chapter division is actually quite unfortunate. Because having read that whole chapter, and this is the problem with reading whole chapters, and chapters aren't always divided the way I'd like them to be divided. I don't have Isaiah 3 yet, that's why I'm grabbing it. I just want to put it in here. I don't think we're going to keep reading. It took a while to get through all those verses, and then... What? Oh, I just copied and pasted chapter 3. Paul. How about chapter 4? It's a short one. See, because chapter 4, you know what's funny about chapter 4? Let me show you something. I'm going to read it. When I did Isaiah, the song, Isaiah 3 and 4 were one song. Because you know why? Look at this. 6 verses. They're like, we got chapter 3 done. 26 verses. Great. What about chapter 4? How long are you making that? 4 verses, 6 verses. We don't need a chapter 4. It should be part of chapter 3. There are chapters that are, 30 verses, or what would it be, 32 verses long, and the thoughts are connected. Listen, and in that day, what day? What day? What are we talking about? We're in a new chapter. No, we're talking about the thing in the last chapter. And in that day, 7 women shall take hold of one man, saying, we will eat our own bread and wear our own apparel. Only let us be called by thy name to take away our reproach. Honestly, I'm not even going to read this whole thing because what presents hope, washing away the filth when he will, let's read it. I just feel like we already read, I had this idea yesterday. I'm like, I should read each passage at the beginning of when we get there. And then that way, that'll provide the context to what we're about to study. Or maybe that's not going to work. In that day shall the branch of the Lord be beautiful and glorious, verse 2, and the fruit of the earth shall be excellent and comely for them that are escaped of Israel. And it shall come to pass that he that is left in Zion, and he that remaineth in Jerusalem, shall be called holy, and even everyone that is written among the living in Jerusalem. When the Lord shall have washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion, and shall have purged the blood of Jerusalem from the midst thereof, by the spirit of judgment, and by the spirit of burning. And the Lord will create on every dwelling place of Mount Zion and upon her assemblies a cloud and smoke by day, and the shining of a flaming fire by night. For upon all the glory shall be a defense, and there shall be a tabernacle for a shadow in the daytime from the heat, and for a place of refuge, and for a covert from storm and from rain. So we have a lot of stuff there, a lot of meaning to take in, and obviously reading the whole thing is not going to leave us with a lot of understanding. But let's go through now verse by verse, and we'll pick up verses 1. We'll start with verse 1, and let's see. Let's start with the first 3 verses. The Lord of hosts. What's the Lord of hosts? I don't remember if we've had that term yet in Isaiah. We may have. A lot of times I'm a little bit slow on picking up on things like that. Lord of hosts. When I was a kid, I didn't know what that meant exactly. Lord of, I didn't understand armies. Hosts is armies. Yahweh Zaboath. I don't know how to say it. Some of the Z. The Lord of hosts. One of the numerous titles of the Lord in the Old Testament. Yahweh Zaboath. And don't quote me on the pronunciation. He doth take away from Jerusalem and from Judah the stay and the staff. The funny thing is, I believe this stay and staff, there are 2 different words in Hebrew. And then I believe the stay, they don't use the word stay twice. I think they use a different word each time. I'm going to check it really quick. It's not terribly important, but I don't know. I just want to know if it's a different word. Because I remember what the words are. I don't remember the words, I remember what they mean. So, hold on a second. The stay is, I'm going to get the quick definition. 4937, mission, which is stay. And 4938 is the staff, which is a staff. But stay, you hear stay and like, what is a stay? Because we don't really use that word very often. We use it as a verb, like we'll tell a dog, stay, or stay with me. We rarely use it as a noun anymore, though we could, But it means like a support. Like a staff would be a support in a symbolic sense. You can lean on it. So a stay is also a kind of a support. Oftentimes, you think of a stay as like a stop. And it's like a stopper, a support. Something that's going to hold something back or hold something up. Something that holds back hunger is a stay of bread. It holds back, that's the idea, is it's holding back hunger. Supporting hunger. Supporting our, the support of the stay of bread is the support of our hunger, that our hunger gets relieved. And what it's saying is God is taking away from Jerusalem and Judah food supply. We're talking about unreliable sources of food. We're talking about the siege of Jerusalem. Like nobody heard this yesterday yet. I was recording a study. And of course, Isaiah contains that passage that I've mentioned on an occasion or two, where Rabshakeh, the servant of the king of Assyria, tells them that they will be soon eating their own dung and drinking their own piss. That's straight out of the King James translation, if they don't carefully give heed to what he's saying. And the reason they're eating their own dung and drinking their own piss is obviously because they're in a siege and they'll be starving. And in fact, I'm thinking of a difference. There was another siege where, the king, a woman comes to the king. It wasn't this siege, actually. It was a different siege. And she comes and she says, my neighbor and I agreed to eat our children. We ate mine yesterday, but now she won't give me hers. That was the kind of situation. And the king rent his clothes because the city was in a very dire strait. The mighty man, the man of war, the judge, the prophet, the prudent, the ancient. These are obvious. Mighty man, man of power. Mighty man could be all kinds, powerful people. Man of war. Obviously, the kind of power we understand. The judge, the prophet, the prudent. I remember every time I look up prudent, it always ends up being pretty much prudent's a pretty good translation. So we're gonna leave it with that. The ancient, which is the old people. The captain of 50. The honorable man, man of honor, man of high station. The counselor, intellectuals. The cunning artificer, craftsman. Eloquent orator, speakers, all walks of life. But mostly these are people in the ruling class. Or at least in the upper class, right? Generally ruling, though. Mighty, man of war, judges, prophets. Prophets aren't always ruling class. But false prophets are. Anyways, the prudent, the ancient, people who tend to, what he's saying is, in a sense, bread and water put for all kinds of foods to stay in the staff. I guess I can't help it. As I look at this in context, these two sentences don't even have verbs, right? You notice that? It's just a list of occupations. And then it says, I'm going to give children to be their princes, and babes rule over them. That's obvious. But is this list just connected to verse 4? Or is it also connected to verse 1? Or is verse 1 just standalone? You know what I mean? And I think that there is a sense that verse 1 and 2 and 3 are connected in that, our hunger is supported by bread and water. It prevents us from, it prevents our hunger from taking over, so to speak. We have our needs supported through the basic foods. We can survive on bread and water. You will not starve to death, that's for sure. If you have if you have enough of it, you will survive. You may eventually come down with scurvy or something, but as far as for temporary, like if you need to survive a couple weeks, bread and water will do. The mighty man. Okay, so these people are also a form of support. Also a form of things that people lean on. People lean on a staff to, and that's almost the what was the word I want? The stereotypical, no, the cliche, or whatever. The cliche phrase, idiom for a staff is a staff to lean on, because that's the point of a staff, is to give you a little extra something to lean on, to take a little less of the burden off of you. And government officials and leaders are supposed to be people that we can rely on, or we want them to be people we can rely on, right? We want to have a king that's reliable. He's going to be administering the state properly, at least to the best of his abilities, and there to enforce the law and protect the nation and all that. And there's going to be negative sides too, but they have a role to play. Judges have a role to play. Men of war. You want to be able to rely on them to reliably carry out their function. You want judges to judge correctly. You don't want judgment to be perverted. Prophets, you want to be able to rely on their prophecy, to know that you hear the word from God. He's not taking away only the stay in the staff of bread and water. There's also, it's the whole stay of staff. It's the whole stay of the staff, the whole stay of bread. I'm sorry, the stay in the staff, the whole stay of bread, and the whole stay of water. Actually, I gotta go back real quick. And in the word stay, what's interesting? The word stay is 4937 mission. Staff is 4938 missionah. All right, I mean they're almost, the words are very closely related. One derives from the other. It's like saying the staff and the staffy. All right, and this word stay is the same each time. It's the same word every time you see it. Well, it's 37. What did I say the number was? Strong's, the whole stay is 4937. So stay is 4937. Staff is 4938, and all the other ones are 4937. So stay is translated consistently. Anyways, so the ancient, you want to rely on old people to be old. I don't mean just old. I mean like to have gained function, like wisdom, patience. They should be more well-rounded. There should be certain things inherent with being old that are redound to the benefit of people around them, that you can be relied upon to be more experienced, relied upon to be more steady, patient, solid, a lot of things. Age should do certain things to us, right? Captain of 50, the honorable man. People, you generally think a man of honor, you should be able to rely on. The honorable so-and-so, I don't know if it's truly honorable. Maybe it's like an official designation, like the honorable gentleman, like the politician. The honorable gentleman from Kentucky. A lot of times they aren't honorable gentlemen, but they're supposed to be, so they call them that, right? Doesn't matter if they're not honorable gentlemen. Doesn't matter if they're showing pornography on their cell phone on the floor of the Congress. That doesn't matter. They're still the honorable gentleman from Florida. Honorable gentleman. And people think they can. I think, it's easy. I politically and stuff like that, I try to put aside the dishonorable behavior of politicians. In general, I do think the whole politicians being bad, like misbehaving sexually, is not good. But it's a common it's common to man. It depends on how bad, I guess. But whatever the case may be, these people who are the people who ought to be reliable, who ought to be supports for society. Just like bread and water. Society needs bread and water, but it also needs judges. It needs the police. You can't defund the police. You can't defund the justice system. Whether we know it or not, we need prophets. The prophets aren't doing their job. Just because you call someone judge doesn't mean they're doing judging right. Just because you call someone a prophet doesn't mean they're doing profiting right. The counselor, people who offer counsel, intellectuals, cunning artificer, people of, craftsmen of skill, whether it be carpenters or woodworkers or metalworkers of all kinds. Even them, no support. Nothing unreliable. From every walk of life, the eloquent orator. But the cunning artificer to me is like the lowest tier in this. Up to that point, I'm feeling very much like we're talking about leaders. Right? But then we get to artificer. I'm like, But even so, if the idea that the corruption goes that deep, then that could be the thing. Because, I'll tell you what, people think of craftsmen as being less intelligent. They don't have a college education. He's just a carpenter. Or he's just a craftsman of some sort, He's just an electrician, just I don't know, just one of those other, skilled professions. Electrician isn't exactly cunning artificer, but I'll tell you what, the ancients would have thought it was pretty cunning. I'll tell you what, to bring electricity in. They would have thought that was pretty cunning. Right? So, it is a kind of, it's a skilled class. They are on an upper level. Also, these are the people who may be responsible for idolatry also, as far as like in this world. He might not be thinking, the electrical engineer or whatever, or not electrical engineer, that would be a college-educated class. I'm thinking of the professions. But he may not be speaking of their professions. He may be speaking of the professional idol maker, since we have been talking about idols. So I don't know. We're going to just leave that be. The eloquent orator. Someone who's good at speaking. Yes. So either it's referring to them as being broken supports, or that they will be affected by this. That what it is, and this is kind of, we plug them in as from Jerusalem and from Judah. The Lord takes away from Jerusalem and from Judah, and from the mighty man, and from the man of war, the judge, the prophet, the ruler, the ancient. From all these people, he's taking away the stay and the staff. Maybe that's a better translation. I hate when I translate it badly and then I do a better job of interpreting it after sitting on a interpretation for about 10 minutes. But there you go. That's the problem with expository impromptu study. So, and I will give children to be their princes, and babes shall rule over them. But because of that, instead of having the captain of 50, the honorable, the judges, the men who would normally qualify for these positions, let's put children in that, and let's have babes. And the people shall be oppressed, everyone by his neighbor. The child behave himself proudly against the ancient, the base against the honorable. All right, so this can either mean that the leaders are mentally like children. Sometimes I say our leaders are children. Because they act like children, they argue like children. They think like children. They have a childlike mindset, but not in a good way. You know what I mean? Like in an undesirable way, in a way that indicates lack of patience, lack of planning, lack of forethought, lack of consideration, all these things. You know, all the things that children are bad at. You know what I mean? All of it, because children are, children can be innocent. Children have beautiful things about them. They're more innocent than adults. They're not jaded. They haven't been as corrupted by the world. There's a lot of positive things you can say about children and their innocence and their purity and their faith. But there's also the aspect of them being absolutely impatient and not experienced and not. What was the other thing I said? Whatever. They don't have their stuff together, do they? Kids are not appropriate leaders. We wouldn't want a child as president, would we? But some people think we did have a child as president, and some people think we have a child as president now. And maybe we do. Maybe our leaders are children, not men, not adults. We're not adults here. We're children. Acting like children. We got to have more. It's like, I don't know. It's like children play Monopoly and they decide, let's just give everyone all the money. See if the game still works. So, in that metaphorical sense, leaders can be like children. We can be ruled by children. But there's also the sense in which, people can become ruled by their parents, by their children, literally becoming afraid of them. This happened in like the Soviet Union, when we have a very powerful state running educational institutions. And this is actually happening in our country. This is something that has never happened before in America, that is happening now. That, and this in specific, the parents are having, in some places, not. Sorry, I shouldn't have. I did eat before. I had a small bowl of cereal before the study, and it has not done my phlegm any good at all. I feel like I'm nearly choking. Okay, so pardon my cough. Children are. Well, this is all right. For example, in the Soviet Union, they used to have kids turn their parents in. Right? And in our country, we're in danger of that, where you have now, with the coronavirus, it's interesting. Now you have teachers invading your home through the child's computer. The child has to sit there in front of the teacher while they're at home. You know what I mean? And watching. From what I understand also, a kid told me that while they're on their Twitch call or whatever, I don't know what the platform is. What is it? It's Zoom or whatever. While they're doing Zoomy school, the teacher requires them to wear masks while they're home on the screen, or that's what some kids reported to me from local. This isn't even a big town, which I think is pretty crazy. But as far as children ruling over them, the sense that I have seen parents ruled by their children, right? Like literally where it's like the children are throwing a fit and the parents are totally enthralled by this, meaning they're made almost like the child's slave. Like the child's bad behavior, the adult has been trained to sort of react to the child's bad behavior by doing whatever they can to appease the child. But honestly, I don't think this is talking about that. Sometimes people let their children rule over them, and that's unfortunate. And sometimes you could say in society, it becomes like children rule over them. I mean, I'll tell you what. I'm gonna feel if they lowered the voting age to 16, I would feel like that, because it's like absolutely a bad idea. We don't need. If anything, we should raise it to 21. I mean, I'm not saying we need to, but if anything, we should not lower it to 16. 16-year-olds have no business voting. But they have a stake. They also have an empty head that we haven't finished educating. In fact, they're in the hands of some communists. Their school teachers are usually communists. And so I don't want them voting. I certainly don't want most kids voting. I'd let my kids vote all the way down to 8. But most kids, no, they shouldn't vote at 16. No. I don't want to be ruled over by the whims of children. They want to get them while they're still most vulnerable to demagogic arguments from the, and from, and to bribery of like, oh, we'll solve all the problems. We've been waiting for you to vote us in. All the problems have just been waiting to be solved. It just needs us, people who care. Because all the people who came before us, they didn't solve the problems because they just didn't care enough to do it. If we would just care enough, we could do it. That's childish mentality. And I do think that this is referring more to the mentality of the ruler than the actual physical age. Though it can refer to that as far as like literally they can be given ruled over by children may refer to the youth of the rulers. Meaning you don't have older people in those positions. You put a bunch of young people. For example, I had a friend who was working at a job, and there were him and a bunch of employees working there, a lot of guys, a lot of white guys actually. And he watched over the course of a couple of like 2 years as every guy was fired and replaced with a diversity hire, mostly young women out of college. Because that's their idea of diversity. And then the young women went about literally through incompetence and inexperience to ruin the department and also to cause the worst year in sales in company history. Because it's not a knock on women, but it's a knock on inexperienced young women for sure. And young men inexperienced. But the young and inexperienced are not they're young and inexperienced, okay? That's all that has to be said. So, you bring in young people, inexperienced people. I won't say women in that. You bring young people and inexperienced people, because women can be exceedingly competent depending on the job. I mean, obviously, I'm not, your average girl, I'm not going to want to help me move a refrigerator. But, other things, of course. Anyways, so, it can refer to young people in terms of like they could be relatively young. As opposed to like, you can have a guy who's 90 acting like a child. Or you can have someone who is close enough to being a child that it feels like it's like, he's a kid. Come on, he's 24 years old. He's a kid. As far as to be running a country, you know what I mean? Why do you think we put in age limits? You have to be, 35 to be president? You can't just be a kid. 35 is pretty young, too. Everyone's 35. Is that old enough? We've never had anyone that young. They've been close. I forgot how old Kennedy and Clinton were. They were in their 40s. And that's fine. They were old enough. They were fine. Young. Yeah, young. So they don't want 20-somethings in the presidency. Because here's the thing, through the popular vote, they might get elected. You might elect a kid. We elected a zombie. So, you could definitely elect a kid. As far as the people who vote can be manipulated to the degree that they'll elect anybody. So it's possible. People are oppressed by their... All right. So I talked about the children. Babes rule over them. Okay, good. I'm in verse 5 now. Okay, I thought maybe I'd skip this. The people shall be oppressed, everyone by another, everyone by his neighbor. The child shall behave himself proudly against the ancient, and the base against the honorable. So, yeah, obviously, there's an idea of respect. And, I believe in mutual respect. God is no respecter of persons. Both the base and the honorable, at least in the eyes of the world, are worthy of being treated equally, with equal dignity and respect. But, in life, children are children should be treated with a certain level of dignity and respect also, but not with the same level nor character of dignity and respect as you give an adult, because a child is not worthy of a certain level of respect. You cannot respect the child too much, lest you get them into trouble. You give them too much respect, give them too much rope, and they will hang themselves, even if only by accident. You don't want to be too lackadaisical with a child, as far as like the permissive. Now, children behaving proudly against the ancient obviously is a very the imagery is very clear. It's inappropriate. You think about it in your mind, a child mouthing off to some old lady rudely, or being, is we know that that's inappropriate, right? And the base against the honorable, you see some hobo accosting some dude in a three-piece suit. I don't know if that's exactly the thought, or base may be thinking. Well, here's the thing. I'm not. I think I'm thinking the wrong way. I'm thinking base outwardly. Prophets sometimes dress in a base manner, meaning like John the Baptist wore camel hair and a very simple leather belt, and he was not dressed in soft clothing and fancy raiment. Right? He had very simple clothes. But it's not about clothes. The base and the honorable, it's about someone who is a man of honor versus someone who is a base, low person. Someone who's crude. Someone who's profane. And not honorable. Like the guy who is drunk all day and seeing prostitutes, is behaving proud. He's mouthing off and whatever, behaving proudly in a sense of like being exalting himself and putting the other guy, whatever, against the father of four who works for a living and lives cleanly and married 20 years or whatever. The honorable person, someone who has honor and someone who should be respected. At least they have earned a certain amount of respect. When you call him an honorable man, it's not just something they assert. It's a man who is worthy of honor. At least when I say worthy of honor, you got to remember, sometimes people say, no one's worthy of honor except God. No one is good but God. But I mean only in the relative sense that humans can obtain these things. Okay, it's like a man can be good in a relative sense to other men, but not in relationship to God. A man can also be honorable in relationship to other men in his dealings with men, but not maybe perhaps in the ultimate judgment of God, because God has a standard of honor and righteousness which is high and above anything a man can attain, because from our youth we go astray and our lives are bound up in sin and iniquity. And so we eventually go astray. There's no child that hasn't gone astray. And most of them from a pretty early age. All the people shall be oppressed, everyone by another, everyone by his neighbor. There's just, it doesn't have to be absolute parity, like everyone is oppressed by everyone else, but it is a picture of everyone oppressed by everyone else. Like in a general sense, like everybody was oppressing everybody else. Not every single person, but it's the idea that different classes of people are going at each other. Different interests are at each other's throat. Right? And and then when I talk about babes ruling over them, I didn't finish that thought. I'm going to finish it real quick now. When I was talking about teachers being in your home, it's like they're in your home, they're watching. And, kids are being given way too much power because, what I wanted to say was, their kids are being taught stuff at school that parents don't agree with. And then parents are having to meet in secret to talk about what are we going to do about it. Like there was a story about in one school district in some city, parents were literally meeting in secret to talk about the woke politics their children were being indoctrinated in and what they could do about it, because they were afraid of the teachers. And by extension of the children, that they might somehow get reported by them. And I was thinking about how in the Soviet Union, my dad told me how that, the government would have kids turn in their parents. they turn them in. And that's what I had in mind when I talk about children oppressing and ruling over them, in that sense of that they could live in fear of their own children. That's pretty bad. When you live in fear of your own children, that's, that they might turn you in. And at the same time, you can't do anything to help them, because if you speak up, it'll get back to school. The children are trained. Do your parents express any anti-woke ideas? Well, make sure you tell your teacher. And your teacher can tell their employer. And they can go to the re-education camp. And that's how those things eventually work. You can see the beginnings of it budding, because we have certain people in this country who are in a communist mood. But I don't think it's actually going to work. But you can see their little aspirations budding. They want their children to tattle on you. They want, you know what I mean? And they are themselves children trying to rule over us, because they have the mind of a child. Communism is a child's dream. Like, anyone who still believes in communism is an intellectual child. At least in the sense of that it can have any practical... You're an intellectual child. At least as far as communism for human beings, forget it. When communists start ruling, you are ruled by children who think they can play like adults, who think they're big and they can manage everything. It says in verse 6, when a man shall take hold of his brother, of the house of his father, saying, thou hast clothing, be thou our ruler, and let this ruin be under thy hand. This whole chapter, you'll notice from the beginning, is about Judah and Jerusalem. It's about their decline. Well, this is a city in decline. This is a society in decline. And you see the power structures that normally hold society up crumbling. And you have people occupying those positions of power who are not, substantial people. They're insubstantial. They're children. I think of some of our more flamboyant representatives in Congress. I think a lot of our representatives in Congress are actually just absolutely useless. But anyway, you get a job in Congress, you go, and then a couple of years, and you've got like this retirement plan and something else. So let's read verse 7 with this. Verse 6. We read 6. In that day shall he swear, saying, I will not be a healer. From my house is neither bread nor clothing. Make me not a ruler of the people. So it's a little obscure. A man's going to take hold of his brother, of the house of his father, meaning some blood relation, saying, you have clothing. Be our ruler, and let this ruin be under your hand. And what this speaks to, I think, is the total desperation for some kind of leadership. The desperation for some kind of proper leader. When a man would just look at his own brother and say, you've got clothing. Why clothing? Does that mean, I've often thought several things that means like you look the part. You've got the attire. Like Barack Obama, when Joe Biden said he was articulate and clean. The first African American you got that's articulate and clean. Or whatever, something like that. He said he was clean. He said he was clean. Like, no other black politicians had ever been clean before. Anyways, whatever. He had a clean look to him. I get it. He had this sort of innocent look to him, the Alfred E. Newman ears and all that, whatever. You look like you could be a president. Let's make you president. But, if you want to talk about a infant in chief, there was one of them. Anyways, and, If you're going to talk about infantile presidents, I suppose the last one isn't exactly off the list either. Certainly not at times. So, but the point is, a man would just look around him and look at someone in his family and see hey, you could be our ruler. You have the clothing for it. Whatever that means. Whether it's, you look the part or you have the externalities. That's, you have the external trappings of, you look like you look like a king. You look like the part. You fit. Those clothes make you look like a king. Your clothing makes you look like a counselor, a ruler, whatever. You have the clothing, so you be a ruler, and let this ruin be on your hand. That's not something people would literally say, but what they're saying is, like, let's find anybody to put in charge of this, that it could be under somebody's control, because it's a mess. We have ruin. And we need to be it under someone's hand, under someone's control. Let this ruin be under your hand. Things are falling apart. There's a society in decay. And we lack leadership, and maybe you can do it, or maybe I think it starts off with hope. But I think the prophet is injecting a little bit of despair in here. This is not what they'll say. What they'll say is like, you look like you could be the ruler. You've got the clothing. And you can turn this country around. Let this ruin be under your hand. You can turn things around. You can fix everything. But what they really mean, this is like a Freudian slip. Just oversee the ruins. Is what you're actually going to do. You'll oversee the ruins. Because you're not going to fix or repair. You're not going to be the repairer of the breach. The restorer of paths to dwell in. No, but just, all you've got the only thing that qualifies you as ruler is the clothes you're wearing. How do you know they're a Supreme Court justice? Well, they're wearing the robes. How do you know they're a policeman? Well, he's got the uniform on. You've got a policeman's uniform. You be the cop. And then you can be responsible for all the crime. Not a particularly attractive, this doesn't sound like, do you feel like if someone came to you like in that spirit, you ready to step in and take control and take command and turn things around? And that day shall he swear, saying, I will not be a healer. For in my house is neither bread nor clothing. Make me not a ruler. I got nothing. I will not be a healer. Hello, Midnight. Doggy's coming to say hi. Say hello. I will not be a healer. I can't. I in my house are not the things that this country needs. I have no bread to give. I have no clothing to give. I have nothing to clothe the naked or feed the hungry. I don't have what it takes. I only have the externalities. I have my own clothing. You have clothing. I don't have clothing. It's interesting. It's like, you have clothing. I don't have clothing. Neither bread nor clothing. So even the externalities that you think are sufficient are insufficient. I don't have enough. I don't have what it takes. You think my clothing is sufficient. I think my clothing is insufficient. For Jerusalem is ruined and Judah is fallen, because their tongue and their doings are against the Lord, to provoke the eyes of his glory. Again, going back to verse 1, it's all about Jerusalem and Judah. So the city and the nation is fallen and ruined because of, almost everything is double. Jerusalem is ruined, Judah is fallen. The whole stay of bread, the whole stay of water. It's usually a lot of doubling here. Make me now ruler of the people, for Jerusalem is ruined. So I don't know if I got much to say about this, except to provoke the eyes of his glory. Notice they provoke his eyes. Now that's a figure of speech when you put the eyes, because the eyes being provoked, it means basically what is seen is provoking. The visuals being presented. And the things that Jerusalem is showing the Lord is provoking his glorious eyes to wrath. You know what I mean? The provokes means to action, to wrath, to correct the situation. The show of their countenance doth witness against them, and they declare their sin as Sodom. They hide it not. Woe unto their soul, for they have rewarded evil unto themselves. Now, I've said many times, we call it sodomy. We call homosexuality, we assume sodomy is going on, right? Because sodomy refers to something very specific, right? But whereas in the Old Testament, in Sodom, what happened is these angels came to the city, and the whole town came out to the door to accost them, and they were trying to break in and capture these angels for the purpose of raping them. And so that was the sin of Sodom. It's not just homosexuality. It's not just homosexuality. Because it wasn't that wasn't the story. It wasn't. They walked into the town, and in the center of town there were two men holding hands, and a priest of Baal was between them, and he was swearing them in the oaths of holy matrimony. Now, obviously, I don't agree with any of that. I'm not pro gay marriage. I'm anti-Defense of Marriage Act when it was out. I don't think we should stop them or try to get in their way of doing what they're doing, because it doesn't do anything. It doesn't help. Like, you can't, it's like, what's the analogy? It's like trying to stop a leak by putting a bucket under it. I don't know. Like, that doesn't solve the problem. Like, it's not the right thing. It's like, I'm trying to think of a way to try to solve a problem that only makes it worse. It doesn't address the root causes, of the problem. And also, the root causes of the problem go deep indeed, and they're beyond anything I can do anything about, or any man can really touch on, as far as homosexuality goes. As far as, like, only the power of God can deliver someone from that kind of bondage, because I do believe it is something that is hardwired. But we have a lot of characteristics that are hardwired. They can be that the Lord can change, alter, or whatever. But I don't think this is the sort of thing. You can't just flippantly compare a homosexual to the people of Sodom. It's a very unfair comparison. Unless they're a homosexual rapist, in which you can compare them to Sodom. They're a sodomite. Like in the movie Shawshank Redemption, they called them the true sodomites, because it is a true. What he's not saying is that homosexuals are all truly like that. What he's saying is that's what Sodom was truly like. He's saying the truth about Sodom is that it was a bunch of dirty rapists. I'm saying they declare their sin as Sodom. I don't think they're saying they declare their sin is sodomy. What he's saying is, like Sodom, they openly declare their sin. They're not ashamed. There's no hiding it. The whole town came out together to rape the angels. There was no, like, sneaking around, worrying about what will the cops do. You know what I mean? No. The cops are right there. The whole town come down to have a good old time with the strangers. Attractive strangers in town. They declare their sin, as Sodom did. They declare their sin as Sodom, and I think that's right. Huh. Yeah, I don't think the word "as" is even in the translation. I'm sorry, I'm being really cheap here by just not showing you what I'm doing. Yeah, see again, right here in the Devil's translation, the NIV, which sometimes gives you a good insight, but I could give another translation. It says, I'm not going to go totally there, but right there, the look on their faces testifies against them. They parade their sin like Sodom. Notice they have like Sodom. Because the word as isn't there, it has to be inferred. So they declare their sin as Sodom means, I agree with the NIV. It's not like they say, our sin is Sodom. Because using as with the force of is something we do in English, not something that's done in Hebrew. But you never know, because the translators might be translating in English. If I declare my sin as, lying, or my sin is, in fact, I think that, isn't that just a grammatical error? If I were to say, I want to declare my favorite color as blue. I want to declare my favorite drink as coffee. You see what I'm saying? Is that a proper formulation in English? I don't know. That sounds like... I know I've done it, but now I think about it, is that like a corruption? Like, some people will say, we should have seen we should have seen that coming. Or you should have... And they're doing should have, the preposition, right? But the right of, right? And maybe they declare the sin as Sodom. Maybe when I think of it as it's because I'm just reading it sloppy. They declare their sin as Sodom. And again, that's not even makes sense, actually. Because Sodom, it would have to be sodomy. Doesn't make sense, right? Oh, whatever. Our sin is Sodom. Well, I don't know. So, the point is, like Sodom, they don't hide their sin. Woe unto their soul, for they have rewarded evil to themselves. It's one of the things I said. People can be frustrated with sinners, and people in your life who sin and hide it. Like, sometimes people struggle with drugs or alcohol or other problems, and they hide their sin. And it can be frustrating because they're hiding our sins, and we feel like we don't know them. Like, sometimes, husbands and wives, maybe the husband has a pornography problem, and the wife, she finds out, and then it's like, oh, I don't know who this guy is, because it feels like things are going on behind your back that you don't know about, and there's like hiding and secrets, and that's not good for a relationship at all. But what it often means is that the person still cares about the relationship, hopefully. That the reason they're hiding their sins is because they're ashamed and they care about the relationship and they don't want to ruin things. But they have a sin problem they can't get rid of. It's a difficult problem to deal with. But definitely it is better, I think, it is good to acknowledge our sin. Right? But acknowledging sin also means we acknowledge that it's wrong and that we shouldn't do it and that we ought to stop. And we have to face the fact that we are corrupted and wrong in our doings, right? When we look at our sinfulness, we got to say that's sin. Like if I commit a sin, like I rob the poor, and I got to admit that's a sin. I rob the poor and I need to stop. I can't rob the poor anymore. I know it's a sin. But some people are like, I rob the poor. I know it's a sin. I love it. I'm such a son of a bee, I'm just always robbing the poor and defrauding the widows. I love it. I love when a new guy comes to town to lock him in my basement and sodomize him. I love it. This is... It's a good thing, it's a good thing I have 600 and whatever how many studies, because it's very unlikely someone's ever going to find that and isolate it for me. Here's something Paul often says. I can't wait. Some people are like Sodom. They declare their sin. They don't hide it. They're not ashamed. It's good to be open about your sin, to declare your sin, to confess it in that sense. But that's the opposite of this. You know what I mean? Hiding it is kind of in between. It's not really the opposite of confessing. Hiding is not exactly the opposite of confessing. Hiding is a form of confession. It's a middle ground. It is. It's the perfect middle ground between total confession and total admission. You know what I mean? On one hand, I confess the sin, I repent of it, I acknowledge it, can't do it. On the other hand, I'm admitting it's a sin, but also I admit it into my life. You know what I mean? I grant it a place in my life, right? And that is no good. You know, we cannot have both bitter and sweet water coming out of the plate at the same time, right? And the middle ground represents, well, I know it's a sin. I'm not prepared to confess it and to repudiate it, but I am ashamed enough to hide it. Because I'm acknowledging, in a sense, by hiding it, I'm acknowledging that I know it's wrong. I'm acknowledging my sin, in a sense, by hiding it. I'm acknowledging it in the sight of God. Now, I unless I'm foolish enough to think I can't, unless I'm foolish enough to think he can't see. But I may, for one reason or another, you know, find myself in a position where I'm hiding sin. Everyone does. Eventually find themselves hiding one sin or another. And it's not a good thing. But, you know, better that than you just say, you know what, it doesn't matter. I lie. And I'm proud of it. Because I lie to get the things I need out of life. I lie for my family and for my wife. I lie to make money and to provide for my family. I'm not ashamed of my lies. You know, that's the other where I'm, you know, in the middle ground be like, well, I'm lying, but I don't want to admit it, but I know it's wrong. I shouldn't do it. I got to do something about this. Of course, the righteous thing, of course, is to confess and say, I do lie, and I know I shouldn't, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So we will woe to their soul, for they have rewarded evil to themselves. That's what we get. You know, if we don't take some sort of, you know, I'll tell you what, you know, people have asked, you know, you know, is there any chance for people to get saved? You know, like they never heard of Jesus, but they lived their life and blah, 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 blah. The thing is, we come before God, and we know, I mean, you got to know, if you haven't made any kind of pursuit of righteousness, don't even forget it. If people say, oh, they were good people, well, maybe they were. But most people are not. There's a lot of people who live their lives, and as Sodom, they're not ashamed of their sin. And when they go to judgment, they're going to be punished for it because they've never been sorry for it. And if you're never sorry for your sins, if you're always just open about it without any remorse, you are rewarding evil to yourself because you will find nothing but evil at the end of your path. Evil being, you know, all the good things you ever thought in life you could have or to obtain, you're going to lose all of it. You will be rewarded evil for evil. That's how it goes. All right, so that's the end of the study. We're 5 minutes over. Okay, we're ready. We're going to pick up at verse 10 tomorrow. Thanks for joining me in this study. Look forward to being back again tomorrow.
For behold, the Lord of hosts, doth take away from Jerusalem and from Judah the support and the staff, the whole support of bread and the whole support of water, the mighty man and the man of war, the judge and the prophet and the prudent and the ancient.